Hi everyone and welcome to fan commentary on the Legendary Battle Extended Edition. Now this version of the episodes is actually a combination of the two final episodes of Super Megaforce with roughly 15 minutes of additional footage that was cut out of the original broadcasting of the two episodes. Very little was added in the first episode. Most of the stuff was added into the final episode. Let me talk about how I felt about this anniversary. The issue with this, I consider it the worst anniversary out of all the anniversaries that we have gone through because there's so many factors that went into this problem. Let me start off at the beginning. When RPM concluded, the series was over. Disney didn't want to support the franchise anymore, and they ended it from there. And we just got the MMPR reversioning. So Saban obviously believed that the franchise still had life in it and continued it. This was right just as Gokaiger started in Super Sentai, and they were celebrating their 35th anniversary. So while they were developing Samurai, Gokaiger was going on, and this gave them an ample amount of time to come up with something what they can do, because no matter what, yes, they were supervising Samurai, they were rushing through scripts, and they copied a lot of the elements and stuff, but still, at the back of their heads, they should have been looking at, well, gee, we'll have to eventually tackle the 20th anniversary when we reach it, which this was a gift from heaven to see this far ahead in advance, because they usually never get this chance in order to capitalize on it, because usually they're only 1 year behind. They don't even get to see the entire season when they have to start adapting the material, and a lot of things they don't get to see, so certain things don't line up, or they see at the last minute, like in Space, where Judd Lin thought, oh wow, this is a space season, then ultimately it never was. And then I understand this is a low budget show. It's a low budget in many different ways because taking stock footage from a Japanese product, they can film tons of episodes together and it saves them a lot of money. And it's great. There's nothing wrong with that as long as you can make a good product. But also, when it's coming to this anniversary season, you should spend a little bit more money. But even then, even if you don't want to give the extra money to pay for the anniversary, you could have planned ahead. I'm saying it from a fan's perspective, but also trying to respect what they go through in the productions. They could have said, okay, we have three and some odd years and change in order to do this special episode. And they could have taken money through the various episodes. Say they took $10,000 from each episode up until the legendary battle, just taking it a little bit at a little bit, you could have funded a really big moment or spaced it throughout the entire season so that you could have maybe gotten back more actors and put them throughout the year so that they would actually have a better payoff. And there were other things they could have done to reduce the cost. The first thing here, everyone complains about this particular episode, is that Orion leaves for no real reason. In the Gokaiger footage, the character's still here. He just leaves and then comes back in the second part. So I had thought of many different ways that they could have also saved money by doing a couple of additional bottle episodes. This is a perfect way I could have thought of doing it too. Instead of using the entire episode where they have to defeat Levira and get her removed, use that footage and intersperse it with bottle footage. Meaning, since you didn't want to have Orion in this episode for whatever reason, you could have used Orion as another side story, and that could have involved a past ranger coming back, and it could have been a simple clip show of this past ranger had come back, and they basically asked, what's been going on? Because someone was curious, someone wanted to know. Maybe other rangers had been, talking behind the scenes, like, what is going on? So one of them approached them, and Orion was the one who was available. Maybe he got injured, so he couldn't go on to the fight, and this ranger came back to do it. I easily had thought of maybe Dana was the one who came back from Lightspeed Rescue, and she was the one who interacted with Orion while Orion was recovering, which would make sense. She can come in. She is the medic, and also it has a small, nice little homage link to her time with Ryan as a Sixth Ranger, it would kind of echo that. And while they go through the episode, they would go through clips and him talking to her about the episode, the past episodes, while they deal with Lyra. And you would only use like roughly 10 minutes of clip show, 10 minutes of stock footage of Lyra, where you can cut out the various things and save money. That's just one example of them saving money. Another reason why this sucked, when doing an anniversary episode, it's cool and amazing. You brought back all these actors. You cannot do it in a season finale because, all intents and purposes, this season finale of this season is the series finale for the Megaforce cast. There's a lot of stuff to wrap up and a lot of elements that you have to pay off or, give them a fond farewell. When you combined it with all these things with the Legendary Rangers, they're taking screen time and they're making the Megaforce team feel unimportant. So they don't get their focus in the final episode, which is not fair. There's a lot of things that just completely get ignored or characters get forgotten. With all these issues with the Legendary Battle, and of course, the very low screen time of the original PR cast members coming back, especially Mike and Emily, they got nothing. They have very little dialogue. They felt superficial to the season. And it's not the fact that how they handled it outside of the production when they brought him back. What they should have done was they should have picked Rangers themselves instead of making it like a blind bag of like, asking actors to see if they're available to come back. Pick Rangers, say five, just stick with the five standards. Pick five Rangers and then personally ask them, and then have backups just in case if X Rangers don't. Not a blind thing, so that you would have it set up. Because again, this is 2.5 years of planning that they could have done. Like, okay, who can we get back? Who can we secure? And then see what we can do. Because they had the blueprints of the Gokaiger footage for over a year and change. If you want to exclude Samurai completely, you had a full year and a half to plan out the Super Mega Force team. That's the reason why I personally hate this anniversary episode. In spirit, it was an interesting idea. In execution, it fell on its face. One of the main things is that these are the final times we're going to see the command center and hear Gosei and Tensu, besides the little bit at the end of the final episode where we hear Gosei's voice. Other than that, these are the last times visually we see them. That's not fair to these characters. They should have gotten a farewell. There was no like handoff of powers, letting them go, nothing. Because of it was jam packed with so much stuff, which you can feel. Even in the extended edition, which adds 15 minutes, it's still jam packed. A lot of bits of these two episodes are good. It's not like it's completely poor. It's just that, like, Troy being a Red Ranger, he has those moments where he does his speeches, which motivates the team. That's great. But the spirit and the backgrounds of these characters just not existent. They're just basic. They really don't do much, and it's just unfortunate. Now, of course, this is the final time we get to see Lavira, and she gets her, her moment in the sun, which roughly pretty much happens in the exact same way in the Gokaiger episode. The episode handled this very well, but they could have easily had taken half of this material out and truncated it and moved it into another episode earlier, because you could like easily cut Lavira out whenever she has to use her maximizer and just cut around it and say she was already, killed from a previous earlier in the episode. And then they could have built up, screen time for past Rangers and or final moments with the main cast. It's always funny though, whenever I see this episode and Lavira gets all this kind of, a final farewell moment when like bigger characters really didn't get any like big finales. Like Prince Vakar kind of doesn't really get anything. He just simply gets defeated after a while, and that's that. I mean, there is some fault to that from the Gokaiger episode footage. He really was not that big of a deal in the Gokaiger either. And then there's a lot of stuff that they had to, cut out, and they didn't use, like the Barizorg stuff is all omitted, the Bosco stuff is completely removed, which I have no complaints just because there's nothing to fill that time. The other characters really don't get much to do, so Lavir feels like the big baddie in this final episode, especially when Mavro gets introduced literally in this final episode when he was introduced in the Gokaiger footage earlier on. Again, he wasn't good either in the Gokaiger because he was just this traditional baddie, but at least he had a presence that built up till this point so that he felt more menacing. You understood him. Whenever I see this episode, you can see that Lavira has built up defenses and all this other stuff, and you think she would share these abilities with the Armada and try to counteract things rather than just brute force everything, because that was her specialty. She understood how to like defend and anticipate and deal with all these attacks and stuff, which made her a really good foe. Here's another example of if this was, chopped up and used as a clip show, all this material like seeing Maskman's finisher could be removed. Even then, the Maskman footage could be removed too without much problem, and you wouldn't see any difference because it's so quick and you could just jump between the two scenes. That's the thing I hated about Moses when they brought in the Super Sentai exclusive suits that were never here and that didn't make any sense. A lot of times you could simply edit them out with almost zero need to shoot additional stuff, or maybe at most a different key close up, which is what annoys me the most, is that they will reshoot things and keep retained footage for no real benefit. It's there to save money in order to, do the legendary fight at the end. But again, you could have done it in many other ways, like I suggested before. A clip show can be a negative on any TV series, but it can also be a positive if it's done really well. If it's a clip show that simply talks about what happened in the past episodes, but you have a guest and they're interesting, and also maybe the character's backstory gets introduced through this clip show, and it's very low, simple budget, and you just have the actors without that much, and then of course like a little bits ranger fights that are material from Gokaiger, it would work without feeling boring. I am glad that they left the rockets intact, Lavira, because a lot of times they would, change that. And in Disney's days, they would have definitely done that. Oh yeah, this is another example of them reshooting stuff from the Super Sentai suits that were never used here, and the only thing they did was change Sun Vulcan to MMPR Red. And that, again, this all annoys me because you're introducing powers and abilities that are nowhere to be found. And the only way these could ever get fixed is in a comic. They don't even bother removing the word Flashman on any of the weapons. So that's the thing I never understood with this. You can reshoot the Sun Vulcan material with MMPR Red, but you won't do it with the other four. Why not make a bottle episode? Why use these suits for no real reason? Because it will confuse, general public people and loose fans. Hardcore fans, even hardcore fans can be confused because these suits are from Super Sentai and they only care about PR. People who are fans of Super Sentai and PR would understand where these suits came from. But also, it's an attachment. These suits come out of nowhere and they have no purpose. Now, if they had introduced the old Super Sentai suits that were never used in PR in a believable way, meaning just take like the Alien Ranger route where they're from different planets and or special power-ups from, I don't know, Gosei's planet. Say he had Power Rangers over the years and these were these, and he was able to call on those powers from his old planet, and these are where these came from, and they gave some sort of reasonable explanation, I would be okay with it. It would still be a little awkward and weird because it's still, giving so much time to suits that we don't have, especially when they didn't use Lightspeed Rescue, which annoyed a lot of people, including myself. It's like this entire scene could have been reshot with the Lightspeed Ranger suits. And there's no real explanation of why they hate Lavera because it makes more sense in the Gokaiger footage, but here it's just like they just hate her right off the bat when they just come in roughly and that's it. And it's just like, huh? Again, this was a really big moment in Gokaiger's 35th anniversary and had a lot of potential in Power Rangers because this is the first time we had a huge amount of this Armada force, thousands upon thousands of forces that can endanger the entire planet. The only time this has ever felt like this was Countdown to Destruction nearly 15 years ago from this point, and it involves the end of the world, which is a really good way to bring in past Rangers. It's just that they didn't take advantage of this. And I'm really upset of how they didn't use Mr. Burley and Ernie 2.0 because I thought these characters were fine. They were fun. Fun little characters that could have been expanded on and used in some interesting ways. It doesn't have to be in any extensive way, just fun ways. Just like Miss Appleby in MMPR. She wasn't used all that much, but she had her place and it was fine. But Burley and Ernie completely got ignored and cut out, which was a shame. Now, some people can argue the reason why Orion left on the spaceship was because they needed to use the spaceship that was from Bosco, which they had to figure out a way to bring it in. They could have brought in that spaceship in any different way. It's possible they could have easily written in an episode earlier on in the show where, I don't know, one crash landed and you could have easily written in Bosco for one episode. A ship crash landed and they used the Bosco suit, and this was their way of, I don't know, maybe trying to infiltrate the Ranger team. Like, say, this person was from Orion's planet who survived and followed him here, and then try to befriend them, and then they exposed him, and they had to get rid of him. And that could have been the easiest way to bring in that ship. On one hand, you could see that the writers of the show, the producers, they're fighting with themselves. That's how I always see it. Whenever something like this goes wrong, you could see that the team wants to be like, we want to do something really cool and interesting. And then they're like, we have all this footage that we have to use, so we can't do anything original. And then it just feels rushed. The thing I don't understand is that why was this not planned out from the beginning? You had all this ample time, but it just felt like no one looked at Gokaiger until literally when they had to start filming Super Megaforce. I know the PR teams can do better. They've done it in the past. That's the thing that feels more disappointing in all of this because we've seen all these producers and stuff, and even the New Zealand team have worked on the show many decades before, and they pulled off really great stuff in the past, like in Time Force. That's a really great season, and Jonathan Zakor worked on it. He's worked on many good seasons and many bad seasons too. Especially now, we have the Q-Rex that comes out of nowhere and it's operated remotely, which could have been used in past episodes. What I also hate is that a lot of the technical aspects of the season are kind of goofed up. For example, they call the mini Zord the Ninja Zord, which they didn't get their details correct on that. These small details do matter to longtime fans, and it wouldn't even take that much effort in order to just look up the footage at all to double check. Okay, what was called what? I mean, you have also wikis and other websites that are dedicated to this information that you can simply quickly do a Google search on and find this information without having these basic mistakes. I had a personal theory on how this, like, what happened here, because with the extended edition, they added in that final fight with Mavro where all the Rangers fight him, while in the original episode it was cut out. But obviously, you could see all that material is filmed and shot. I don't think that was ever going to be filmed post, because these episodes are filmed in advance. So my theory was they had actually had finished filming the final season finale of the show, which had Mavro, the two Mavro fights, and the Rangers simply defeat him, while there was no legendary battle at all, meaning no guest Rangers came back. But because fans' expectations were like, oh, we got to have like a really great fight, and everyone was so amazed by the Gokaiger footage, we were not expecting. I was not expecting them to go all out and go like what they did with the Gokaiger movie that had all 199 Rangers and they had a ton of guests. I was not expecting that. I was expecting an anniversary that respected the past, and it was very basic, meaning like five or six Rangers that come back and were used at least in two parts. Or at least you got back 10 people and then you sporadically used them all throughout the season. The problem is they didn't go that route. So it felt like they like, oh crud, we forgot to, think about using the legendary Rangers, the past Rangers, and they were like they had to throw something in near the end of production. And so because of that, they cut out about 5 or 8 minutes from the original intended cut to make the legendary battle, because that's what it just feels like. It feels like it was added on, and they were like, well, what can we do that we can use the footage for? And what they had was the original X-Borg fight that was at the beginning of the Gokaiger, so we can use this. But because of these choices, everything gets all ignored and forgotten about, and that's what annoys fans personally, is because you did set up things. It's like I really thought the whole Troy with the memory stuff was interesting. And I thought, oh great, maybe Troy's special. Maybe he was born from something unique. I don't know, maybe he's involved with Zordon. Maybe Gosei knew him from as a child. Maybe he was his son. There were so many things they could have gone to. Maybe he was just connected to the morphing grid specifically. Or he was the son of a past ranger that we didn't know about. Maybe time travel's involved. There was so many things they could have done. Now, a lot of people, of course, will say that this is like Countdown to Destruction, and oh, of course it is. But there's nothing wrong with doing this, because you can only do the end of the world type of stories only so many ways, and they'll feel very similar. And we haven't done that for many, many years, so it was totally fine for them to have that similar feeling, especially when they brought back Astronema slash Corone into the story. This is the beginning of the second episode. So roughly about 3 minutes of material was added into the previous episode. Now, if we had these rangers set up before, like a few of them were, guests over time, it would be more better. Well, instead of here to just feeling like a simple roll call of like how we can bring, who we can bring back, and how would they feel useful, they really didn't get much to do. Dana only has this one line here, and Carter really doesn't say anything at all. That's the thing that sucks the most. You bring these people back, and they don't say anything. It's just like, why? Why have them then if you're not going to give them any lines? It's just like these actors have been not been on the show for many, many years, and we need to hear them. We need to see them again. They use the characters in appropriate ways. It's not like I'm saying no. They did get these little these things here and there right. Same thing with Cassie and TJ. They did use them well because this makes you feel like, oh yeah, passing of the torch and what they did inside in Turbo when they first appeared. Tommy thing is a little bit more weirder because they wanted to show White Ranger and Green Ranger, which doesn't really make much sense. He has Saba, and as a fan, you kind of ask yourself like 50 million questions, like how does he have Saba? That doesn't make any sense. Why is he the White Ranger here, but not the Green Ranger, and then Green Ranger later? This is an extended scene. Some of this material is also extended. There's a little bit more of extra Troy and Jake wandering around in the rubble. I would love to see deleted material and any lost footage or outtakes, for example, as bonus material on, DVD Blu-ray sets for PR. Because with the extended edition, it does show you that it does exist and that these things do, happen on even on PR. Or more often extend episodes that you think that are worthy of being extended, like big moments, like anniversary episodes. They could be like, well, let's always make a longer cut of the episode and have it as either a bonus material for a DVD Blu-ray set, or just as like here's this on a streaming service as an additional thing. That they don't utilize PR to its full potential. I will say them doing that amount of detail work with the rubble and the destruction of the city, that is a lot of work and time and dedication to do. I commend them for that. They got that right. That the feel of the episode is there. It's just the other stuff is not. Like again, Wes and Damon, they didn't get anything to say there too. Damon doesn't even have a single line in the show, and he's one of my favorite characters. It got me very, very annoyed that he said nothing. Some people, of course, make fun. I was like, oh, he's still wearing the Terra Venture costume after 15 or so years. Yeah, you can argue that it doesn't really make any sense why he didn't change out of it. But then again, it's possible that he's just kept it all these years. He just kept working on it because just because they live on Miranoi doesn't mean he didn't want to get rid of the old mechanic outfit. And he just, kept and maintained it. And maybe it was his lucky charm. I really didn't have an issue with that. But I am grateful that they didn't use the in space uniforms for TJ and Cassie because that wouldn't really make any sense. This is the best moment in the anniversary episode. It's a personal moment with the Rangers and just the Rangers worrying about the world. These little character bits is what I love from PR because we get a breather. It's a big moment. It's this, like, what do we do? How do we overcome this? This is what PR is to me. These little small bits. If they had done this throughout the entire 2 years of Megaforce and answered all their questions that they set up, gave them backstory, and utilized Troy to his full potential, and then incorporated the 2 seasons together better, we could have had a really great run and anniversary for the show, and the show might have been in a different position today rather than everyone being disappointed in this anniversary. This could have been the biggest anniversary for the show, and it may have never been eclipsed ever. Of course, this feels very, very reminiscent to what they did in space. Although in space, that's where the Rangers were revealed of their secret identities, which they could have actually done in this finale if they had the time. I think that would have been interesting as well if they just said, you know what, we don't care about our secret identities. I want the world to know that we're doing this because, you know, why not? There's always a question with secret identities in the PR universe. Like, is it really necessary? In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Because villains know who they are, so they can always attack their families. But it always protects them because do you want to be hounded by the media or just people in general? They couldn't go back to school in the normal sense without being constantly, maybe used. There's so many different things that they, would deal with, which would be interesting episodes. But I understand why they don't reveal their identities all that often. Now, this location has been used in so many Super Sentai seasons, many, many times. I think most notably in Go Ranger, let's see, Gal Ranger, Time Ranger, especially where they had Frax on the building, where he gets thrown into it, and all the main fights around with the Zords. I think Decker Ranger used it a fair good chunk. Of course, other things like Command Rider use this area. It's a very common location. See, now this is another thing I really would have loved from the show to be used more often because you have all these Ranger powers and all these sub modes like here, the Red Dragon Rangers power up, and they didn't use them throughout. Even in Gokaiger, they did a lot of stuff in Gokaiger, but there were certain things like that they didn't really care to do or use as like bonuses. Like, why not use the Dragon Shield on the other Rangers, for example? I also noticed that the villains from Mavro's team have all this weird echo on their voices. Like they try to make them sound more imposing or at least different than past villains, which is a little an odd choice. I didn't understand why they went in that direction because sometimes it can be distracting. For anyone who doesn't understand the whole Bosco thing and Gokaiger, because he was a character that was completely cut out, he was the main rival for Gokai Red. They knew each other from his past life, where he was a pirate and he took treasures. They worked together until he betrayed him, and that's where this ship comes from. In the episode, Gokai Red actually, attacked him, ran into a ship, and took control of it with Silver, and then that's how they get to Mavro. If you pay attention really quickly when the ship takes off, you could see the Bosco flag that says a B. Now, the cockpit in the US footage doesn't really match with the exterior, but it was, decent enough. I'm not complaining about it. It's just a nitpick. I do like the cockpit design, and I think it was used later in Dino Charge. I think it was for certain elements that were taken from it. I think it also acted as the landing pod interior, just bits and pieces of it. I do like this where we actually see the actors' faces because it was a good way to use the material because they didn't couldn't use any of the interior stuff because we saw Gokai Red. Although if you think about it, it's kind of dangerous for them not to have their helmets on. Now, if you pay attention to the corridors, you'll notice there's a sign that's in English that says "Note to get oxygen." You think that would be added in post? No, that's actually what it said in Gokaiger. It was just some weird thing they wrote there in English. Most of the writing in the spaceship is in English, which is just convenient for us. I never personally like this scene because what it is that we hear Mavro's voice, we hear Troy's voice, and when I've watched Gokaiger many times, and it's more subdued in the original footage, and you can see it in their actions. You can see Mavro is yelling and has a high voice, but he's like very slow and calm. Same thing with Red, and Troy is speaking loud, and it doesn't really work with the footage. While Silver's the same. Now, in the original airing of the episode, this is the only fight that the Rangers had with Mavro, and after that, the rest of it was cut out and removed, and we just focused on the legendary fight. And then they re-added the second part of the fight back in, which I thought was a good call, because the one thing that PR seasons usually have is the helmetless roll call, or at least a helmetless scene. I do wish more of the shows would show their faces more often in the costume, because you still get that disconnect, which I think is one of the best things about Ninja Storm, is that we see their faces all the time. I will say one thing, it's nice that they actually destroyed the Armada's main base rather than the command center being blown up, because it's usually the Rangers side of it gets destroyed and the bad guy side usually sort of gets completely ignored. I do like this change though. In Gokaider, this came out a little bit different. The Rangers actually use the in space powers for their advantage, which I thought was like, oh, that's nice. That's how you're supposed to use the abilities. If you have Rangers, past Rangers, use their abilities to help you in any which way you can, which I thought was unfortunate in the Mavro fight. They didn't use any of the other Ranger powers, which always feels weird. It's just like there are some Ranger powers that would work great in this circumstance. Like, for example, with Mavro, I would have switched to swap mode power ups, and also Omega Ranger, because he has that time dilation field ability. Even though I don't like the episode, these bits I always enjoy. It's not like I hate everything just because of, the story sucks and not. No, these moments, I think if everything else was fine and worked out better, this ending of the show could have been good. If they had focused on ending Mavro's fight one or two episodes earlier, and then, used the same material and then defeated him, and then had the legendary Rangers either happen as a posting, or at least them happen earlier, meaning the legendary battle would have happened earlier in the season and it would have been an original villain for us, so that they wouldn't have to use, they could have used the X-Borg material there, but then also use an original villain that guided them, and then that's where they fight with the legendary Rangers. That way, the finale would not be crammed, because there's so much material on, but not just by the old past Rangers. I also hated that they called these battleizers. They're power ups. They're not battleizers. I don't know why they got that from. Could this have happened differently if the show was not restricted to 20 episodes? I don't know. Other seasons, like Dino Charge Season 1, that works perfectly fine as 20 episodes. But then again, this is the only season or series that uses the Go Sager and Go Kaiser seasons together, and they haven't done that ever since. So it's possible, just because there's 2 years and only in 40 episodes when you're taking something that originally had 100 episodes and cramming it into 40. It just doesn't work. And I think that's the main problem. I always personally thought of them, skipping Go Sager would have been the best choice of action and going right into Go Kaiger for the 2 years and done the standard formula with that. And it might have worked out better because really, you don't lose much if you cut out Go Sager, and then they could have adapted Go Sager in the future if they really wanted to. Just do it backwards, like how they did with Beast Morphers. They went back to it and are doing it for 2 years. There was no real issue with that. So I think it would have worked out better if they had started with Go Kaiger's footage. And it would have made more sense because it would have been seasons 20 and 21 as proper anniversaries. This I hated the most because, again, we bring in past Rangers we haven't seen in many years. They're supposed to be always used for big moments. Every anniversary had a big baddie, big monster, big thing that the other Rangers could not handle. And all they do is throw X-Borgs at them. That's all. It just feels underwhelming. It's very disappointing. And it's just not satisfying. Now, this is always a cool moment no matter what, that we see all the Rangers. Although, as a fan, I'm nitpicking because, like, why are certain Rangers missing than others? I didn't understand that. There's some arguments like, well, what's with the Turbo team being all there when they shouldn't be because they're all in other teams? But of course, fans thought of the Robot Rangers, and that's Justin, which is a valid, justification for that. But other people are missing, like mostly fifth and sixth Rangers for their respective teams are missing, like right there. Ninja Storm, Jungle Fury, the all main cast are not there, but then they appear later. I don't understand, like, they lost the suits. I always would love to ask the production team, like, what happened here? The worst thing they did in this entire moment was Mike and Emily completely got ignored. And even in the extended edition, when I thought, oh, okay, we're getting all the actors back, and the extended edition is going to add more stuff to it, they'll add lines back in and get maybe more reactions. No, they basically didn't film any additional stuff for Mike and Emily. Why did they come back? What was the point of them coming back if they have no lines? That's not fair to them. Seeing all these suits is a great moment. I am glad that they digitally fixed Tommy's suit because it's a pet peeve of a lot of fans that they're using the Dino Thunder alterations from the suit, which is like that's not how the suit looks like. And people do like that version of the suit. I don't because it's not what the show had. If you pay attention, you can see the boom microphone in Patricia's helmet. This a little bit with Astronema and Corone. That was nice for fans. That was a nice little nod because again, reminding of what she's done. And imagine all the past Rangers that had come back, got little moments remembered. Either maybe they used footage from the past episodes, or maybe just little scenes here and there of reminiscing. That's what the show really just needed. A little bits of that, and that would have been totally fine for fans. You don't need to go out in this huge, big budget show like all this stuff and their lives in the future. No. If you just give fans just little nice nods of history, it would be fine. This I hated the most. Robo Knight died in the previous episode saving Orion, and he just magically comes back, and there's no answer whatsoever. I that ruined his sacrifice, and this seems to happen all the time. If you pay attention, you're going to hear Tommy's famous grunting, which I think the audio editors got confused and they thought that was the Green Ranger from MMPR, Cam's a Green Ranger. So I think that's the reason why they put it over, because there was really no point of doing that. But it confuses me that JDF actually recorded ADR for his grunting for this. Now this is the one shot that they miss fixing the helmet and the power morph color. Luckily, in the next anniversary, they corrected the suit permanently so that the silver stripe and the silver power morpher were properly replaced. Again, it's nice seeing Tommy. It's just, it doesn't feel earned. Now, this never really made any sense to me, why the Rangers, put their hands up and turn into energy and disappears. It's using the footage from Gokaiger, which, again, I don't understand why. I mean, they had to have a dramatic exit, but why not do like a cool specific shot for the US, meaning all the Rangers do their special abilities that make them go away fast, like the ninja streaks for Ninja Storm. The MMPR Rangers would teleport out, things like that. Some of them can call their bikes, and just, you don't have to have the bikes physically appear, but like as an energy, a moment of energy. This is another additional scene for the Rangers. We get this little bit of closure, if you can call it closure. And because of all the rushing and all this extra stuff, these characters don't even get a proper send-off ending, because it was the big moment of the new Rangers, the old Rangers coming back, them. These guys really didn't get a really good farewell, which is sad. And Tensu and Gosei, yeah, forget about them. They're completely ignored. We don't know what happens to Gosei and Tensu. Do they leave Earth? Are they still there? Do they go back into hibernation? Nothing. We just see Troy put his sword down and they walk off into the sunset. I would love if the Super Megaforce cast could get something in the future, anything that can redeem them. Because I always say, any bad season could be redeemed if you bring back the characters and use them in a really good, interesting way, including them. If you like my content, consider subscribing and leaving a like. See you in the next video.